Hi, this is Father Mark Boulos, and you are listening to episode 572 of the Bible as Literature podcast. The thorns in Luke press and threaten. They are the self-referential swarm posing as a flock, the so-called community that gathers to its own voice, circling death, mistaking its stench for sweetness, even as it strangles the one bearing the seed. These are the thorns. But the roots are of another kind. They spring up from the seed itself, a daughter of Israel, fruit of the master's vine, afflicted for 12 years, who cannot live apart from him. She is not self-referential. She does not reach out to harm, nor to press her point, nor to insist upon herself. Though she is a daughter, she does not presume the right to cross the boundary set by what is sacred. She does not assume she is equal, much less above. The threat that governs this boundary is the same one given to the priest in the wilderness. The outsider who draws near shall be put to death. It is the earth of creation itself under his command. Life and death hinge on reference to him, which becomes submission. Absent reference, submission collapses into the crowd of thorns. The Idah swarming carrion, the lynch mob, the beloved neo-pagan community. The priest stands at the edge of that body, assigned to draw near, yet living under the same threat that borders the sanctuary. For proximity to what is holy is not possession of it. To approach on one's own terms is to perish. To be drawn near in obedience is to live. Pressure exposes the heart of this law. In Numbers, Balaam's donkey pressed his foot against the wall because she saw what he could not. The pressure revealed the blindness of the man and the sight of the donkey. In Luke, the crowd presses upon Jesus, but he perceives what they cannot, the deliberate touch of the one who steps forward in faith. The same pressure that blinds the self-referential reveals the one who truly sees. The thorns in Luke do not understand this law. They confuse nearness with ownership and approach with entitlement. Like the outsider who encroaches upon the altar, they rush forward without command, pressing, consuming, swarming, as if circling carrion. Their nearness is self-initiated. Therefore, they take life. But the daughter, like the biblical root sprung from the seed of the sower, is drawn near by the command. She approaches not to take, but to receive. Unlike the thorns, she does not presume to cross the boundary by right. She draws near as an offering, not as an invader. Now she stands at the center, and he is her circumference, her shield in the time of strife. Hear, O daughter of Israel, draw near and see. Do not be afraid. The Lord is your shepherd. This week I discuss Luke chapter 8, verses 43 to 44.
You're listening to the Bible as Literature.
Each week, the Bible as Literature podcast brings you in-depth discussion of the biblical text in a format short enough for your morning commute, but long enough to be substantive, posing difficult questions meant to keep you engaged. If you value this work, please consider donating as little as 25 cents per episode. That's just $1 per month. To learn more, please visit patreon.com/Bible. That's patreon.com/Bible. Thank you.
One of the reasons that the metaphor of gathering and scattering is so difficult for students of the Bible is because our premise Besides being self-referential, all of us are self-referential. We can't escape it. But aside from this basic difficulty, our premise is also communal. It's civilizational. We begin with the assumption of we, not just I. We begin with the assumption, or the presumption, rather, of we, as though it is the good. But neither the I nor the we can resolve the dilemma of tyranny. It's only the absence of the I or the we, which is him, the inexistent God of Scripture, the inegregious biblical God, who delays always the day of his retribution by scattering. Today is the commemoration of the prophet Joel, and we mishear Joel. We talk about the pouring out of the Spirit in positive terms, but it's a day of accounting, a day of judgment. It's not good news. That's why 1 Corinthians is such a forceful letter. You don't play around with God's Spirit. To be filled with the Spirit, if you talk about it positively, is to speak as someone who is literally full of it, because you don't know of what you speak. If you can talk about being full of the Spirit, you're full of yourself. That's the mechanism, because the Spirit is a force to be reckoned with on the day of the Lord in Joel. Come on. So Jesus scatters in Luke for your sake and mine. Because when you are scattered, you are released from judgment. Scripture is hopeful because of diaspora. You don't approach, you don't lay claim, you don't touch what is holy. And to be gathered somewhere, it's not holy on your terms, because we're together and we have a community and God is present. No, you can't speak this way. This is neo-paganism, because you and your relationships are the reference. I know that you have no way to even hear what I'm saying because you're all formatted backwards in an anti-scriptural frame. It's practically impossible because you're all formatted according to the Roman triumvirate. Go and learn what this means. You are formatted according to the frame of the Roman triumvirate. You are in relationship with each other, which means you are cut off from the biblical God. He is sufficient for himself, and he has established his tent in the wilderness, and it's taboo. He scatters us until the day of recompense for our sake. Tribe, nation, identity, which is what we build when we are self-referential, is a curse. It's desolation. Horeb. But to approach, to draw near to his holy mountain without his command is also unto destruction. So we're scattered in the wilderness, which is mercy. It has practical implications. It's common sense. It's how nomadic pastoral people deal with conflict. It's okay to settle the matter and part ways until the day of the Lord, when he will settle the accounts. Why not? Would you rather fight over a piece of land? To do so is to lay claim to something that doesn't belong to you. The premise of Scripture is that it all belongs to God. You can't lay claim to anything. You can't touch what is holy. It's all about reference point. But the minute you say we, Therein lies the problem. There is none but him. Go and repeat this prayer. There is none but him. That's the trick. That's how it works in the book of Numbers. And that's exactly how it works here in the Gospel of Luke. It's the difference between the crowd of thorns. They are the thorns in the parable of the sower. Lexically, I explained this last week. It's not an interpretation. The terminology of the text links them. They are the thorns in the Lucan mashal, which is differentiated from the other occurrences of the parable in the New Testament. Only in Luke do the thorns that encroach to press upon the one who is choked by money and the pleasures of the world. Only in Luke do these thorns gather to squeeze and to press, not on the seed, but on the student. The crowd of thorns, the community. The community wants to thwart the work of Jesus Christ so that the daughter of Jairus will not spring up from the seed sown by the sower. So what is the difference between the crowd and the daughter? Let's hear the text through its terminology. Now, what's striking, and it comes through the pen of the author of the gospel, who presses, no pun intended, the terminology with different Greek terms that link lexically. The first example, the first term that links lexically to the offering in the wilderness is opto, and it appears in two different forms in the passage. And a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years and could not be healed by anyone came up behind him and touched him. Itsato, chof resh bet. Came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, and immediately her discharge of blood stopped. And Jesus said, "Who is the one who touched Afsamenos, chof resh bet me?" And while they were all denying it, Peter said, "Master, people are crowding and pressing in on you." So we'll come to the other terms that I want to focus on. But this first term that corresponds to chof resh bet is opto. And I gave the two examples. It corresponds and is translated as touching in English. But it's ipsato and afsamenos. Both of them, the root in both cases is opto, and it corresponds to chof resh bet. Interestingly, there's another term that we'll come to that also corresponds, and that is pros erchome, which occurs here as came up behind him. Pros elthusa also here corresponds to chof resh bet. Why? Because this term in Hebrew and also in Arabic means to draw near, but it's functional, like everything else in Semitic languages. It corresponds to the offering, the qurban. But do you draw near according to the command? Are you commanded to draw near? Are you functional as an offering? Or do you draw near as someone who is self-willed to make a demand? And this is not a theological definition. This is how, once again, the term defines itself in the text. I want to keep stressing this. And if you happen to pick up a copy of Rise Andalus, you'll see the methodology at work. If you want to deal with how a term functions in the text, you see how it is used in the text. You follow its itinerary. And the interesting thing about tracing a term's itinerary in Scripture is that you actually hear Scripture while studying a term's usage. So you see the function of a word, and you see how its root branches out in the tree of life, which is Scripture itself. That is the word and branch universe of the sacred text. It's the tree of life. But in doing so, you not only understand how God defines the word, which is all that matters. That's all that matters, is how God defines his own speech. But you learn and become more knowledgeable in the content of Scripture itself, which is what really matters. This is Bible study. Everything else is noise. Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters but to sit and study the words of God. It is not interpretation. Interpretation is a lie. I can barely breathe while I'm saying this to you. Interpretation is a lie. Meaning is a lie. It is just the persistent and consistent and patient hearing and study and regurgitation and utterance of his divine utterance. You study the words of Scripture. It's cataloging. I just can't believe other people aren't doing this. That's how amazing this work is. So let's take a few examples and see how God explains himself for those who have ears to hear. For everyone else, I want to say yalla bye, but I don't even have the heart to say that. I want to just invite you to reconsider, because sincerely, it's your loss if you don't. I can't make you do this. But this is really beautiful. And it's endless. And there isn't a moment or a second of this work that I don't hear something new from him in the text. So you have just some examples here from Numbers, the use of this beautiful function, Qof, Resh, Bet. And of course, I mentioned it has a corresponding function in Arabic, which is important. It's important for those who are familiar with Arabic, with the everyday usage of this term. Qurban. Again, I've said this before. It's what we use to refer to the bread of the offering in church. You hear it in the liturgy, Qurban al-Muqaddas, the holy offering. But this is even secondary. That's just a secondary usage that if you've grown up hearing the liturgy, you're familiar with. The more important point is where that usage comes from and why. And of course, by now you're used to me. It traces its itinerary all the way into the Quran. So let's just hear the terminology. Numbers chapter 3, verse 10. So you shall appoint Aaron and his sons, that they may keep their priesthood. But the outsider who comes near, see, it's to draw near, haqarib, shall be put to death. Now, people hear this and they say, oh, it's so violent. Come on. Yes, if you're hearing the text with blinders on, ideologically and interpreting, sure, it's violent. But anything can be abused, misused, twisted, and reduced. It's literature. You can abuse the writings of Mark Twain. You can abuse the writings of Hemingway. You can abuse Harry Potter. I mean, you can abuse Dostoevsky. You can abuse any literature. You can find fault in anything. This is ancient literature. So I guess if you're ignorant or lazy, you can turn anything into an excuse for cruelty. And it's not hard to do with something that requires effort to study. I'll grant you that. But this is a genius text. And it's saying something critical for contemporary humans to hear, and far more subtle than what so many have dismissed out of ignorance and illiteracy. And it has to do with reference. Because the reality is our inability to hear what is being said in Numbers, our folly, is resulting in suffering and death. And with or without the Bible, we would be in the same predicament we're in. So it's worth hearing. More so because so many people are abusing it. But believe me, if there were no Bible, we would still be behaving the way we're behaving. But those who were to camp before the tabernacle eastward, before the tent of meeting toward the sunrise, were Moses and Aaron and his sons performing the duties of the sanctuary for the obligation of the sons of Israel. But the outsider who comes near, it's the same instruction, haqarib, shall be put to death. Why constantly is there this admonition about the outsider? It sounds xenophobic, as many will interpret it. Notice that ugly word, interpretation. I know all you postmodernists love it because you're self-referential. Let's hear a third example. Everyone who comes near, haqarib, Who comes near to the tabernacle of the Lord must die. Are we to perish completely? That's 17:13. So in these three examples, this expression, haqerib, is from, again, the root kof resh bet. It's to draw near, to approach. It refers to coming near to something sacred, something holy. But the question is, reference. Are you drawing near because you were commanded? Are you drawing near in submission? Or are you approaching in order to lay claim? The law of approach doesn't just govern the tent of meeting. It's not just about the tabernacle. It governs all of creation. So this warning that the outsider who draws near shall be put to death, it's not about protecting tribe or identity or privilege or this bastardization of the text, chosenness. It's such a horrible word, such a twisting of God's instruction. This commandment is about a biblical principle, which is God's open field, the sade. And here I encourage you to go pick up a copy of Father Paul's Rise of Scripture. There's an audiobook. It's really important. You need to hear it again and again. And it's important, especially if you don't know Hebrew or Greek. It doesn't matter. The cool thing about that book is that it opens the text to people who don't speak those languages. It's an equalizer. And that's a threat to academics and elitists, because they want you to think that you need them to hear him. You don't. Just go pick up a copy of Rise of Scripture. It's the great equalizer. And that's what I'm trying to do on this podcast, is lay out the root system so that you understand that Scripture is open to everybody. It's open to everybody. You just have to see the connections, and suddenly you realize, if you see the connections, the tree of life opens and the scales come off. And suddenly you hear and understand, and the lies are exposed. So the sanctuary, like God's field, is an open expanse. It's not an enclosure, but his command, his instruction, governs everything. It governs the openness. Remember, does the Torah cover the tent, or does the tent cover the Torah? Can you depict that in an icon? Life exists only by reference to his instruction. You think you're going to build a church to protect the gospel? Are you a clown? What are you talking about? People who talk this way are fools. They're like a mirage in the wilderness. You think you can control the field? He is God. His command orders the heavens and the earth. Impostors need not apply. Now the priest, the Levitical priest, stands at the edge of the field, where hearing and obedience hold the ground together. The priest doesn't hold anything together. God holds everything, but it's submission, so to speak. Right? It's the trust. Abraham's trust was reckoned to him as righteousness. You cannot cross that boundary without this trust, this obedience, this hearing. To cross without hearing is to move without reference. You are gathering violence when you do this. You are gathering for God's judgment. When you gather on Sunday, you're being gathered for judgment. Community builders. It's blasphemous. The phrase community building, it's not an opinion. It's scriptural. It's blasphemy. It's community building is effectively another kind of Zionism. You don't build anything. In Scripture, when God scatters, it's mercy. Jesus says from the cross, Father, remember, Jesus is not the king, his Father is. It's a mistake everybody makes. Jesus is not the sheikh, so to speak. His Father is. He's the locum tenens. He does not release anyone from the cross. And it doesn't say forgiveness. The word forgiveness doesn't occur in Scripture, in the Old or New Testament. The word in Greek in the New Testament is release, aphes. We covered this. So all this pontificating by Christians about forgiveness is Hellenistic psychology. You're talking about the human psyche. Literally in Greek, that's what you're talking about. Has nothing to do with the Bible. Quote me. Because when you talk about forgiveness, it's self-referential. It has no place in the New Testament or the Old Testament. But to release a debt is the purview of God the Father, but not until the day of the Lord, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians. So until then, you just give each other space. You have no right to hold anything over anyone, but you still appeal to the Father because you have no right. That's the point. Jesus has no right. It's written. He says, Father, just release them. You can't claim anything. You can't gather anything. It's not your field. It's not your space. It's not your debt to release or to claim. So you let it go. It's not your land. It's not your city. You don't own anything. There's no possession. So you can't move without reference. Jesus doesn't operate without reference. He has a reference. But when you gather, you're gathered for judgment. So the thorns, though, move self-referentially, devouring what cannot be possessed. So the danger in Scripture is not being outside. It's good to be outside. Diaspora is a blessing. Stepping in forward, but the danger is in stepping forward on your terms. Coming forward and making a claim as though it's your community, your tribe, your space, your city, your whatever, and mistaking freedom, the freedom that God gives you. Father, release them. Mistaking that freedom for ownership. It's good to be free in the wilderness, to delay the day of judgment. Lead us not into temptation. Even the priest lives under, it's a sentence. The priest lives under the sentence. Delay, 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 delay. He's close to what is sacred in Numbers. Doesn't mean he owns it. He has no power over it or control. And it's not good to be close. He's in jeopardy. Now, the clearest example of this in the Gospel of Luke, lexically, is Judas, because it's the same root. It's functional. The text defines itself and explains itself. When you're working the text and working it out, you don't say, I wonder how the narrative works. Forget the narrative. Forget meaning. You have to study the roots and look at terminology. Because there's this term in Greek, engisen, which corresponds to kof resh bet. While he was still speaking, behold, a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12. Like this beautiful daughter of Israel who was hemorrhaging for 12 years. Both Judas and this woman are linked to the household of Israel through the number 12. Two kinds of offerings. Qarib. Judas, one of the 12, was preceding them, and he approached Jesus to kiss him. Kof resh bet engisen. This pertains to numbers. Are you approaching to lay claim, to lay hold? Are you the thorns encroaching, the crowd of thorns in Luke? Or are you approaching as the offering, the holy offering, Qurban al-Muqaddas, to be lifted up? The big question. The text does not lie. All men are liars according to the text, but the text does not lie. Please dispense with meaning, dispense with interpretation. And hear the words of the Lord. Judas embodies the unauthorized closeness. He's self-referential. He's the one who approaches the priest on his own terms to make his point. He is the New Testament fulfillment of Ha-Qarib in Numbers, the one who draws near and dies. So in Luke, 22:47 is the clearest example of the self-referential disciple. You might say, actually, that Judas isn't the thorn, but he's the one who's choked by the thorns. He's, in a way, the disciple who's choked by the cares of the world. Not Jairus. The tabernacle, like the open field, is the earth of creation under his command. Its boundaries are invisible, but they are absolute. Its center is defined by hearing. To be drawn near by instruction is to live within the Lord's circumference. To come near unbidden is to dissolve into dust. If he does not call you, you cannot make aliyah. Are you kidding me? Life and death hinge upon reference within the open field of his command. There is another term, pros erchome, I mentioned, that corresponds again to Kof Reshbet. Then the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Mahir, the son of Manasseh, from the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, came near Kof Reshbet, and these are the names of his daughters, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. This number is 27. So this is a different example of approach. There are plenty of examples of people who approach and make their claim and face judgment. But listen to this example. This case, Kof Reshbet, presents us with a rare example of a righteous petition. So the daughters of Zelophehad step forward to the entrance of the tent. They don't make a claim. What do? Just take a guess. They submit. And this reflects the function of the root. It's the function of the root itself, in which the one who draws near becomes interfunctional with the offering. Their nearness in the story, in Numbers, is in contrast, for example, to the Idah of Korah, who also came near, Yaqribu, and were swallowed up by the earth. So the rebellious Qarib ends in death, which I explained just a minute ago. That's the way it works. The obedient Qarib bears fruit. Law and inheritance in Numbers take root and blossom. How? The way it always works in Scripture. Abraham's trust was reckoned to him as righteousness. Through submission, you submit, and then the seed does what the seed does. You become blind and God sees for you. You stop talking and God sings for you. The Lord is my strength and my song, which means I am weak and I can't sing. He has become my victory. The Lord acts on my behalf. The Lord sings on my behalf. And the Lord is victorious on my behalf. As in the case of the Mushallam of 2nd Isaiah, the suffering slave, who can't do or see or speak, but he's perfect and at peace because God fights for him as he did in the Exodus on behalf of Israel. That is how God is fruitful when we get out of the way through submission. So their approach in this way, those who submit, reveals the womb of nearness. It becomes, it's motherly. When you submit, you become the fertile earth, the womb of nearness, the field, rightly ordered by the command of God. So it's the correct behavior, the correct approach. And this approach, which is in deference and reference to him, gives life rather than takes it. He said, relate to them, in truth, the story of Adam's two sons, when they both offered qarraba qurbanan, a sacrifice, and it was accepted from one of them, but was not accepted from the other. That's Surat al-Ma'idah, the table spread. That's 527. Interesting. They both made an offering. Why was it accepted from one and not the other? The Damocles sword. What's the difference between one qurban and another? It's the same law of approach, the one you find in Numbers, Qof Reshbet. Both sons of Adam draw near. They draw near through an offering. Remember, this root, it's not just offering. That's how functionality works. It also means to draw near. But be careful when you draw near. You don't want all this piety about being close to God. Nasty business. It's fake business because they want to pacify you. The way you put a pacifier in a crying baby's mouth. They want you to believe that gathering at church is in order to feel good, to feel close to God. But you do not approach what is sacred except when you are called by the command for judgment. The offering is the time of testing. Both sons of Adam drew near for the test, but only one son passed. The test is in reference to him, and the question is whether or not you show reverence to him. And this is the term in Arabic, taqwa. So, are you in deference, in reference, deference and reference, with reverence toward him? It's a big question, because if not, the outcome is violence. Either way, you're gathered for judgment. You do not want to come close to the light, as Father Tadezi said over and over again in the classroom. It's better to be left in the dark until the day of the Lord. Just be scattered, be in diaspora. It's mercy. We say it in the Lord's Prayer. Do not lead us into the test. You didn't think about that, did you? Because when the day of the test comes, the day of the Lord, there's a possibility, one way or another, of being scattered, of being judged, of being smashed. Horeb, and the Hereb of the Lord. It's the desolation of God's instruction. You don't want to go to the sacred place to encounter him. Scripture activates your mind. The pacifier wants to shut your mind down. So this word taqwa, waw, qaf, ya, is to guard, protect, to preserve, but also to be wary. But remember, you can't protect the scroll. The tent covers the scroll, and the scroll covers the tent, and you can protect neither. It is he who protects you. He is the center and the circumference, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. You had just better hope on the day of the Lord. Until then, be content to wander in his care in the wilderness. So the last term is apothlivo, and it corresponds to the function lamed het sade. Now, it's an important term because, as I said last time, there was a specific word used for press that brought together the parable of the sower across the New Testament, but distinguished the Gospel of Luke, which led to this beautiful expression, the crowd of thorns in Luke. I love this expression. I'm going to keep saying it. But this is the problem with translations, because they translate everything in English as pressed, but this is a different word in English. Master, the people are crowding and pressing on you. It's not the same word that we heard last week in Greek. It's a different word, apothlivo. And it corresponds to this function, lamed het sade, which happens to bring forward the story of Bilam, or as many of you are used to hearing, the story of Balaam's ass, which comes to us from, again, the book of Numbers. Now, what's interesting about the book of Numbers, where we keep hearing about approaching and being killed, or approaching and being judged in violence, is that the violence happens not because of execution, which is literary. It's not historical. I mean, come on. If the absurdity of trying to do something historical insults the intellect, the violence happens because people try to lay claim to things, as I said. But clearly, Luke is handling the book of Numbers. You can't make this stuff up. These connections are not imaginary. And the connection to Bilam is very specific lexically. So in this story, which unfolds from chapters 22 to 24 and then concludes in chapter 31 of Numbers, there's a trajectory that ultimately presents to us a character who truly is the opposite of this beautiful woman who functions as the qarib, the offering that draws near in submission. In this case, we've got a character who swallows or devours, which is the other kind of character in the Bible that approaches and ends in death, right? So you can transgress the rule in Numbers, or you can submit. So in 22:25 in Numbers, you have this verb, lahas, which describes a scene of pressure born from obstruction, which is exactly what we find in Luke. In this case, it's the donkey who sees the angel of the Lord standing in a narrow path, pressing Bilam's foot against the wall. So the donkey sees, but the human being doesn't see. Bilam is blind. So there's pressure from an unseen presence. Right. And then Bilam acts out violence in reaction to what he doesn't see. The donkey sees, but he can't see. Now in Luke 8:45, the lexical correspondence, apothlivo, creates a powerful parallel. You have the crowd of thorns pressing on Jesus, coming in from all sides, squeezing, constraining. But in this case, it's reversed. Because in Numbers, it's the donkey that sees. And the human being can't see. But in Luke, Jesus sees the unseen intentional touch. The crowd can't see it, but Jesus sees it. Peter can't see it, but Jesus sees it. So it's the crowd of thorns that's creating all this distraction, indiscriminate pressure. But within all of that, one woman presses deliberately. The crowd is pressing chaotically, but she presses deliberately. And Jesus, who is functional with the donkey, distinguishes her touch from everybody else. So here, this root, lamed het sade, indicates the closeness of these characters in a confined space. It's unavoidable contact, but the access of awareness, in other words, the access of awareness is different. So in Numbers, sight moves upward from the beast of burden to the locum tenens. Remember, Bilam represents, in principle, the king or the Lord. Or who does he represent? He represents himself in the end. That's why he fulfills the meaning of his name, who devours everything up. That's why a donkey speaks for him. But in Luke, the sight moves downward from Jesus, the locum tenens. By the way, Jesus is already walking on the same ground as the donkey. Okay? But it moves from Jesus to the woman, the lowly woman, the daughter of Israel. Meanwhile, the crowd of thorns remains blind. So does Peter, but, I think Peter's almost there for comic relief at this point. So in this one scene, pressure, both scenes from both texts, pressure exposes blindness. but it also shows discernment. So the angel, technically, but it's not flattering of the crowd, but technically corresponds to the crowd. You have this constricting environment that creates the pressure, the pressing. In the one case, you have the donkey that sees and reacts, but Jesus sees, he perceives. Because both the donkey and Jesus pertain to God. Now, if you are a son or a daughter of Genesis, it's not insulting that Jesus and the donkey are functional. But if you're anthropocentric, it is. But it shouldn't be. Not at all. Jesus perceives because he is in reference to his Father. So you have lahas and apothlivo, this pressing through constraint that creates this inversion of sight. And sight is an important function in Luke, by the way. So in Numbers, it's the donkey, and in Luke, it's the one who will enter Jerusalem riding on a donkey. It's breathtaking, actually. You can't beat Scripture. You cannot beat Scripture. So you move from Bilam's blindness to Jesus' sight, and it completes the arc of perception under pressure, where his own constriction consumes the swallower who cannot see, because he would lay claim to what belongs only to the Father of Jesus, while Jesus, pressed by the crowd of thorns, who would dare lay claim to the student of the sower, this one Jesus, despite their clutch, is able to see clearly within their grasp the one who reaches out as the offering to God. Yalla. Bye.
You've just heard the Bible as literature. Thanks for listening.
The Bible as Literature is a production of the Ephesus School Network.